So remember that in the last lecture, we talked about the node architecture, where two fundamental parts are the thread pool and the event loop. So in this lecture, you're going to learn all about threads and the thread pool, and in the next one, we will then dive deep into the event loop. So let's get started. So first off, when we use node on a computer, it means that there is a node process running on that computer. And the process is just a program in execution. And we already learned that Node.js is basically a C++ program, which will therefore start a process when it's running. This is important because in Node, we actually have access to a process variable, which we're going to use later in this course. Now, in that process, Node.js runs in a so-called single thread. And a thread is basically just a sequence of instructions. But it's not important to deeply understand what a thread or a process is. That is more about computer science. Just imagine a thread as being a box where our code is executed in a computer's processor, alright? Now, what is important to understand here is the fact that Node runs in just one thread, which makes it easy to block Node applications. And this is something that we talked about before, actually, but it's something really important to remember, because this is one of the unique features that Node.js brings to the table. So again, if you run your Node application, it will run in just a single thread, no matter if you have 10 users or 10 million users accessing your application at the same time. And so you need to be very careful about not blocking that thread. And we will of course take care of that throughout the project in this course, okay? Moving on, let's now quickly understand exactly what happens in a single thread when you start your Node application. So when the program is initialized, all the top-level code is executed, which means all the code that is not inside any callback function, okay? Also, all the modules that your app needs are required, and all the callbacks are registered, just like the ones that we used for our HTTP server in the Node Farm app. Remember that? Then, after all that, the event loop finally starts running. And again, more about the event loop in the next video. What you need to know for now is that the event loop is where most of the work is done in your app. So it's really the heart of the entire Node architecture. But here is the catch. Some tasks are actually too heavy. They are too expensive to be executed in the event loop, because they would then block the single thread. And so that's where the thread pool comes in, which, just like the event loop, is provided to Node.js by the libuv library that we talked about before. So the thread pool gives us 4 additional threads that are completely separate from the main single thread. And we can actually configure it up to 128 threads, but usually these 4 are enough. So these threads together form the thread pool, and the event loop can then automatically offload heavy tasks to the thread pool. And all this happens automatically behind the scenes. It's not us developers who decide what goes to the thread pool and what doesn't, alright? Now, the expensive tasks that do get offloaded are all operations dealing with files, everything related to cryptography like hashing passwords, then all compression stuff, and also DNS lookups, which basically matches web domains to their corresponding real IP addresses. So this is the stuff that would most easily block the main thread. And so Node takes care of automatically offloading them into the thread pool, where they don't block our event loop. And that is the most important thing that I want you to retain from this video, alright? So let's now move on and talk about the event loop itself.